This story is called The 99th Wife, and it's a fairy tale. Katharina was the 99th wife of the Grand Sultan. He loved wife number 1. He liked number 2. Number 3 was pretty. Number 4 made him laugh. And number 5 could sing beautifully. But as for the rest, well, he couldn't remember their names. Katharina was the daughter of the Tsar. She came from a land of snow and sledges and samovars, which are teapots. She was 13, a bit too young to be married, but she lived in the olden days when Tsars and sultans and kings could do anything they liked and magic spells still worked. She did not really want to leave home, for she would miss the sleigh rides with her brothers and sisters, but her father said that it was her duty. For many years, the Tsar and the Sultan had been having a war that no one could win, and Katharina was part of the peace process. Her wedding would save many lives, the Tsar said, so off she went to Turkestan. Katharina hoped her husband would be young and handsome, with a good sense of humour. She was a bit surprised to find that the Sultan was as old as her father, with a big nose and a fat tummy. But it didn't really matter, because after the wedding he kissed her cheek and sent her to her room and forgot all about her. The Sultan's wives lived in a huge palace called the Seraglio. They had pretty dresses, wonderful food, maids to do the laundry, and au pairs to look after their babies. But there was a snag. They were not allowed to leave the Seraglio. Never. The Sultan had passed a law saying no man could look upon his wives. Men were not allowed into the Seraglio except blindfold. Any man who saw one of the wives, even by accident, had his head chopped off. Katharina was bored in the Seraglio. There was nothing to do but sit around on Turkish carpets, eating Turkish delight and having Turkish baths. But she was stuck until the day of the dance. The Sultan wanted to have a disco. No men were invited, of course, just him and his 99 wives. He asked his number 1 wife to order new frocks for all the women and lots of delicious food and a DJ. But we live in the olden days, said wife number 1. Tapes and CDs haven't been invented yet. Get some musicians then. All the musicians are men. Never mind. They can play blindfold, said the Sultan. The best musician in town was a handsome young guitarist called Ali Fender. He lived with his mother in a house next door to Mr. Ping the magician. Ali was very pleased when he got a message from the Sultan. Can you play at the Seraglio tonight? But his wise old mother said, Don't go. I've got to, it's the Sultan's command, said Ali. Say you've got a tummy ache like you used to when you didn't want to go to school. I want to go, it'll be a good gig. Well, you be careful. Whatever you do, don't look at the Sultan's wives. If you do, the Sultan will chop off your head. And you'll look a bit silly playing the guitar with no head on your shoulders, now won't you? Mothers said things like that in the olden days, just as they do now. A maid put a blindfold over Ali's eyes and tied it tight, then took him by the hand and led him into the ballroom. He could hear the chattering voices of 99 women. He had to step up onto a stage. Then he heard the Sultan's voice ring out a command, play. Ali played his favourite tune. The Sultan clapped his hands in time, well, more or less in time. All the women danced. When the tune was over, the Sultan shouted, Splendid! Give us another! Ali played for an hour, but still the Sultan clapped and the women danced. He played louder and faster, hoping to tire them out, but they just called for more. At last, the Sultan cried, Just once more, I'm knackered. Ali played a lively tune and began to jump up and down to the beat. That was when the disaster happened. Ali got so carried away, playing his guitar and jigging about, that his blindfold slipped. For a second, he could see out of one eye. In that instant, he saw the most beautiful girl in the world. She looked back at him, her eyes wide with surprise. Quickly, Ali bowed, so that no one could see that the blindfold had slipped. While bowing, he furtively pulled the blindfold back over his eye. When he straightened up, he was blindfold again. But the young wife had seen him, and he waited for her to shout. The guitarist looked, he saw me, off with his head, but she said nothing. The maid led him out of the seraglio, gave him a purse of gold from the Sultan, and sent him home to his mother. Ali could not forget the Sultan's wife. After a while, he realized he was in love. He went next door to see the magician. Mr. Ping was from Cathay. He had wrinkled, leathery skin and long black hair that he wore in a pigtail. He made magic out of sunbeams. Ali told him, I've fallen in love with one of the Sultan's wives. Hush, said Mr. Ping in a panic. You could get your head chopped off just for saying that. I don't care. Which one, anyway? There are 99 of them. I don't know her name, but she seemed very young. Katharina, said Mr. Ping. I think she's beautiful. Can you get her out? Yeah, right. And then she can have her chopped off. Yeah, right. And then she can have her head chopped off too. Not to mention me. I'll give you a purse of gold, said Ali. Now you're talking, said Mr. Ping. But I can't get a wife out of the seraglio. I'm the best magician in the Middle East, but I'm not all powerful. Ali sighed. If I could only see her sometimes. Ah, said Mr. Ping, I could manage that, but you still couldn't marry her or anything. I don't care, said Ali. Could you really get me in to see her? Where's that purse of gold? Ali gave him the money. Mr. Ping went to the window. He took a handful of sunshine and twisted it into a strange knot. Then he said a magic word. There was a noise like thunder and a smell of ozone. Ali turned into a blackbird with shiny feathers and a yellow beak. Cheep, cheep, said Ali, meaning, wait a minute, what's happening? Now you can fly to her bedroom window, said Mr. Ping. You'll be able to see her. Cheep, cheep, said Ali, meaning, but she'll think I'm a bird. I can't help that. Cheep, cheep, said Ali, meaning, can I change back into a boy when I'm with her? Only if she kisses you first, said Mr. Ping, and he sat down to count his money. Ali flew to the seraglio and looked in at all the windows until he found Katharina's room, high in a tower. She was just as beautiful as he remembered. He sat on her windowsill and sang. His song meant, kiss me, Kate, and I'll turn back into a boy. The song was very tuneful because he was a musician. Katharina enjoyed it, but she did not understand the words. To her, it sounded like cheep, cheep. She gave him some bread from her breakfast tray, but she didn't kiss him. When night fell, she closed the shutters, and Ali flew away. In the morning, Ali came back to Katharina's window. He sat on her windowsill while she bathed and dressed and ate her cornflakes. He was happy to be with her, but he wished he wasn't a bird. This happened every day for a week. Ali the blackbird would eat out of Katharina's hand and sit on her shoulder singing. She stroked his shiny black feathers and talked to him. She whispered that she did not love her husband, the Sultan, who had only kissed her once. She said she was in love with a handsome young guitarist, but she would never, ever see him again. Ali said, "That's me, I'm the guitarist, just kiss me and you'll see." But to Katharina, it sounded like cheep, cheep. Some of the other wives didn't like Katharina because she was so young and pretty. One of them complained about the blackbird, and the next morning the Sultan came to Katharina's room while she was in the bath. "Good morning, my wife," he said. "What's your name again?" "Oh, my husband, I am Katharina." She got out of the water and wrapped a towel around her. "What's that bird doing here?" said the Sultan. "Oh, my husband, he's just a pet." "I'm not sure about that. I didn't like the way he looked at you when you were in the bath." The bird flew from the windows to perch on Katharina's shoulder. If the Sultan did anything bad, Ali intended to peck him to death. "He's quite harmless," said Katharina, and then she kissed the blackbird's head. The blackbird turned into a handsome boy. Katharina was astonished. It was the guitarist. "Oh ho," said the Sultan. "I knew there was something fishy about that bird. Off with his head." Katharina was desperate. She'd only just found her love, and now she was going to lose him. "Oh, my husband," she said, "please, before you chop off his head, let me have one day with him." The Sultan smiled a sinister smile. "All right," he said. "Thank you." The Sultan's smile turned nasty. "Then I'm going to chop off your head too. I hope that will teach you not to fool around with guitar players." Katharina did not know whether to be happy or sad. She would have one day with Ali, then they would both die. The Sultan said, "Who turned him into a bird anyway? I bet it was that crafty magician, Mr. Pong." "Ping," said Ali. "Ping, pong, whatever. I'm going to chop his head off too." He went out and locked the door. Ali could not fly out of the window because he was a boy again, so he decided to enjoy the few hours he had left. He and Katharina spent all day talking and all night kissing. Very early in the morning, before sunrise, a tough woman police officer marched Ali and Katharina to the courtyard. The executioner was sharpening his axe. Mr. Ping was there too, waiting to have his head chopped off. Ali said to him, "Can't you get us out of here?" "My spells don't work without sunbeams, you know that, and the sun won't rise for another half an hour." "But the executioner's ready now," said Ali in despair. "Look at the edge on that axe. They're only waiting for the Sultan to come and give the word. We've got to think of a way of delaying things until sunrise." But Ali could not think of anything. The Sultan arrived. Suddenly, Ali had an idea. He raised his voice and spoke to the Sultan. "Oh, mighty ruler, may I play one more tune on my guitar for you before I die?" "Nice idea," said the Sultan. "Very emotional. Someone fetch his instrument." Ali played better than ever. When the tune was coming to an end, he started again at the beginning. He kept going, on, waiting for the sun. It was the longest piece he'd ever played in his life. He thought the sun would never rise. At last the Sultan said, "Very nice, but that will do. Off with his head." The executioner lifted the axe. The sun peeped over the mountain. A sunbeam shone straight into the courtyard and lit up Katharina's hair. Quick as a snake, Mr. Ping grabbed a handful of the sunshine and twisted it into a knot. Then he said a magic word. There was a noise like thunder and a smell of ozone. Suddenly, Mr. Ping was transformed into a bright yellow lizard with a long back tail. He scuttled across the courtyard and disappeared down a drain. There was another thunderclap, and Ali changed back into a bird. He realized he could fly away, but he didn't want to go without Katharina. Then there was another crash of thunder, and Katharina was transformed into a lady blackbird, which, as you know, is brown. Ali and Katharina flew up from the courtyard. The executioner looked really disappointed. The two blackbirds perched on a high tower, cheeping to one another happily. The Sultan looked at them and said, "Well, I never." After a moment, they flew away, higher and higher, until at last they disappeared into the mountains. They were never seen again. Next day, the Sultan passed a law banning guitars. The end.